to Public Health America, a weekly program produced by BronxNet in partnership with Mercy College. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. Here on Public Health America, we speak with experts from an array of specialties across the liberal arts and health professions to provide you with not only the best science, but practical tips to live a healthier life. We also celebrate what studies have long documented, namely the unparalleled value of a liberal arts college education by setting the stage to pursue a career of your choice, increase lifetime earnings, and engage in civil debate. Our experts will share decisions they made and support they received that helped them to beat the odds. By sharing one or two life lessons, their stories may provide you with the inspiration and method to realize your dreams. This is Public Health America. Hello, welcome to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. It is my pleasure to welcome on the program with us today Dr. Meredith Kneavel, Associate Dean of the School of Nursing and Health Sciences at LaSalle University, and Dr. Bill Ernst, Program Director and Associate Professor of the PsyD Program at the William Paterson University. Meredith and Bill, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you too, Bill. So I know you've been doing, each of you have been doing some cutting edge work on the development of peer concussion education. Tell us a little bit about your work. Set the table.
Well, I think one of the things that we're heavily involved with is figuring out ways to make concussion safer for student athletes. And the NCAA and the Department of Defense put out a call for funding to develop innovative educational programs. So Meredith and I, along with others at the college, answered that call when we were all working together at Chestnut Hill College. And the concept that Meredith and I came up with was to develop a program that uses student athletes themselves as the main vehicle to not only increase concussion knowledge, but to increase intention to report concussion. The culture of concussion, especially around safety in student athletes, really requires a lot of attention, because student athletes don't want to report their concussions. They want to stay out on the field. They want to, so anyway, that's kind of what we focused on.
Very incredibly important work. And obviously we all know about the press with respect to professional football players and the really deleterious effects of, long-term untreated and undiagnosed concussions across those careers. Meredith, let me ask you, if I may, what are the sports that place athletes at greater risk? In other words, is there a way to compare football versus soccer versus wrestling versus boxing, or is that even done? Like, how do we gauge the concern that one might have as it relates to athletics and concussion?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were able to compare football and some of the high concussive sports, and they're actually well known. I think one of the things that people don't realize is that things like women's soccer have some of the highest rates of concussion. They typically think football, but also things like basketball, women's lacrosse, men's lacrosse, and even ice hockey, where we don't typically think of concussions, but women's soccer, men's soccer, of course, women's field hockey, they have some of the highest rates of concussion. And that's where we wanted to focus some of the attention, making sure that athletes had that knowledge and that they took that back to their teammates.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. So, and that's very helpful. So what age, Bill, what age do we want to start doing this tutoring? Because, I go to my children's athletic events all the time, and you can see, little boys playing football and little girls playing soccer. Where are you focusing your efforts? Because obviously across the developmental spectrum, that's a lot of work to be done.
Sure. Well, we started at the collegiate level. And really, we think the best time to get started with this is around middle school. Kind of harness the normal developmental, importance of peers and fitting in. And we think that's a good time where, kids are getting to a point where they cognitively can understand some of these concepts well, and where they really start to influence each other quite a bit. So middle school would be a really good time to get things started, and also get things started around, what concussions are, what are their deleterious effects, and make it normative to report them and take care of each other. When kids are starting to play more competitively, and before these attitudes like, keep playing even if you're hurt, suck it up, no pain, no gain, before these attitudes start to really, really get entrenched, because it's hard to undo them once they get entrenched.
Sure. And I remember years ago a coach I had, and he always emphasized, never play hurt, never play tired. And I think sometimes there are mythologies that develop, within cohorts about, like, you have to play hurt. And don't get me wrong. I'm sure that there are coaches out there that are giving that we could find athletes that could share messages that would not be so positive. But I think the work that you're doing is so critically important. Meredith, so you and Bill are working on these development of peer concussion education. Tell me a little bit more about that work. Do a little bit deeper dive in terms of what are the sports you're starting with, and how are you recruiting the athletes, and what are the programs you're trying to put together?
Yeah, well, I'll build a little bit off of what you just said about your coaches and building the sort of qualitative piece that you're talking about. So one of the pieces of the work that we did was we actually had the athletes report thoughts that they had about reporting, sort of the thoughts that you were talking about, and then replace those thoughts with thoughts that would be positive. So it's really it's a two-part program where the student athletes will learn about the concussions, and the two parts include what we call sort of like, this is your brain on concussion. So the pathophysiology of concussion that the student athletes teach their peers about. And then the second part is the replacement thoughts. So they actually write down, here are thoughts that would prevent me from reporting, just as you were discussing. And then here are the thoughts that would improve my reporting. So an athlete might have a thought like, well, I don't want to report my concussion because it might keep me out of play. It might prevent me from keeping my spot on the team. And we have them think about what would be replacement thoughts. And we found that these two components together really do improve reporting.
Great. Makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like a pretty cognitive approach to some degree.
It was definitely based on a cognitive behavioral approach,
Sure.
The second part particularly.
Well, let me ask you this in terms of the developmental aspect of all this, college kids. I mean, now as an old guy, I'm very cognizant of how frail I've become. As a 20-year-old, I felt like I could run through a brick wall. And that, nothing ever, I had no imagination of what aging would actually feel like. Is that an issue? Meaning that at 18, 20, first you got the pressures, as Meredith just outlined aptly, about wanting to stay on the first string and what that might mean even financially in terms of scholarships and so on. But then there's also just this cognitive reality of, you can run a 4.5/40 and you can, lift 300, bench press 300 pounds. How do we really get into their fundamental psyche that with age, the injuries you incur as a child will matter? Is that an issue?
Well, you hit on a very important thing developmentally. That young adult age group, they often feel invincible. And athletes in particular, they're so dedicated and so motivated. They've worked so hard, especially at the collegiate level, to be among the elite group of about 4 to 5% of high schoolers that can play at that level. So all these things intersect to make it very, very hard to shift the culture to one that supports safety. So the way in which we try and meet that head on, Bill, again, is use the peers. They're not going to listen to some neuropsychologists like me with glasses or a neuroscientist like Meredith. They really don't that doesn't resonate with them. But when the toughest, most respected kid who's a peer educator on that team says, hey guys or hey gals, we got to start really looking out for ourselves. These concussions can really become a problem. They can keep you off the field longer if they don't get diagnosed properly, if you don't go through return to play protocol, and your play is not going to be 100%. And if the coach doesn't know why, they may pull you out of the game because you're not, playing at your capacity. So we really try and meet that head on using, a peer program to change the norm. But you're right. There is some, it's a real hard thing to address given where they're at developmentally, where if you and I had a concussion, Bill or Meredith, we'd be the first ones to raise our hands and go, I have to teach a class tomorrow. You have to run a college tomorrow. We can't risk it. Where a lot of these students aren't quite there yet. But anecdotally, last thing I'll say real quickly, a very interesting thing starts to happen when they first get to college and they're trying to make the team and establish themselves. They really don't want to report. But anecdotally, over time, we hear things like, my collegiate sports career is coming to an end, and I have an accounting job waiting for me, and I'd like to have a family someday. So sometimes that can shift the calculus a little bit towards safety, but it is a real challenge.
Meredith, let's turn to assessment for a moment. I mean, clearly, if an athlete is involved in a moment and then they are unconscious, I think anyone would, or I hope most people would recognize that a full assessment would need to be done. But I can imagine a world where there are many kinds of more mild head injuries that are concussive in nature, and without proper training or having the right people on the team that recognize that stuff, that could be missed. So talk me through a little bit about like what, if there is something that happens on the playing field that could even remotely result in a concussion, what assessment takes place to try to ascertain if that event has actually happened?
So some of the peer education that was really helpful, and this is both on the field as well as off the field and a little bit after, which we found was really, in some ways, an unintended consequence of this program, is that because the peer educators are embedded on the team, and such a unique aspect of the team culture was that the peers were going to each other. Whereas normally the student athletes will go to the athletic trainer and say, I have the symptom. Because they felt so comfortable with the peer educator, they were going to the peer educator and saying, I'm not feeling 100%. I'm not feeling absolutely perfect. Or the peer educators were looking out for each other. Or the teammates, because they were educated about the signs and symptoms, were looking out for each other and saying, I now know about this. Are you sure you're okay? Something seems off. Something doesn't seem totally okay. And I care about you. I care for you. And because we now know about this, I want to make sure that we bring attention to this. And because everyone was aware of it, and because they were looking out for each other in a new and unique way, they really were bringing it forward. And there was now this increased culture, and we were hearing about this in a way that was, I think, really unique and really different from anything else. And then they were encouraging each other to go to the athletic trainer to say, you're still having a headache 3 days later.
Right.
Please go to the athletic trainer.
Sure.
Or I will take you. I'll walk you there.
Right.
And if it's nothing, it's nothing. That's fine. Because as we know, the student athletes had difficulty distinguishing, is this just a headache? And one of them even said, I think we had some qualitative research that said, was my headband just too tight? Or is this a concussion-related event? Right? So get it checked out.
Yeah.
That's fine.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Meredith and Bill will tell us a little bit about their undergraduate educational experiences and how those experiences set the stage for the excellent careers and professions that they have today. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. We'll be right back.
Most hiring algorithms would scream me out.
Some bosses couldn't see me as a leader.
I've run this place for 20 years,
but I still need to prove that I'm more than what you see on paper.
I've been writing code as long as I've been able to reach a keyboard.
This is what I do. It's second nature for me, coordinating 100 details at once.
The way my mind works, I have a very mechanical brain.
I sold them on my skills.
You gotta be so good they can't ignore you.
My magic is
Analytics and empathy. That's how I'm getting clients. You have to have the confidence in yourself to show up and defy the odds.
I'm more than who I am on paper.
I never got a college degree. And today, I'm the CEO of my own company. People want to tell me I'm one in a million, when actually I'm one of millions. Stars are all around us. It's time for them to shine.
You can now watch MNN, Brick TV, QPTV, and SIC TV on BronxNet. Tune in to BX Omni, Channel 67 Optimum, 2133 Fios during most Sunday evenings. We'll show you some amazing content from our friends at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, Brick TV in Brooklyn, Queens Public Television, and Staten Island Community Television. Every borough represented in the Boogie Down. Epic partnerships for the ages. And catch our new Next channel, produced in partnership with MNN, 24/7 on BronxNet Channel 952 Optimum and 2138 Fios.
Welcome back to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. So Meredith and Bill, we always start this part of the segment with the same exact question. Meredith, let's start with you. Tell us where you were born and a little bit about your formative experiences.
Oh, thanks for the question. That's great. I was actually born in Delaware. And I would say my formative experiences were really watching my parents who worked extremely hard. My dad is a psychologist by training, and my mom is actually a college professor. And they both worked extremely hard to raise us and to make sure that we understood how much one had to work and how important education was. Both my parents grew up in Baltimore. My dad came from a family who survived a really difficult time through the Depression, and my mom's family had a very similar experience with a very large Irish Catholic family surviving in that time period as well. So nothing was taken for granted. And the emphasis was always on making sure that you were well educated so that you could get through those difficult times. And that emphasis was placed there so that you could really enjoy what you were experiencing and really understand how important that was.
Sure. Bill, same question. Where were you born? Tell us a little bit about your formative experiences.
Sure. I was born in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, along the Jersey Shore. So very fortunate, nice place to grow up. Neither of my parents graduated college. So my dad was actually a school bus driver, and the bus that he drove was the bus for the children that were in special education. So I was really fortunate where he would sometimes allow me to go along, and I would get to observe all these children with their differences and strengths and challenges that they had, and just how my dad interacted with them. And that really made a very, very big impression on me. Also, my parents ran a guest house, like a bed and breakfast at the Jersey Shore. And my dad and my mom would always make it a point to take in this group of adults with severe mental retardation and disabilities. And they would always give them 2 weeks in August. And a lot of, motels were a little bit concerned back in that time to take in a group that were different like that. But my dad just was, and my mom too, were just really solid people around that and always wanted to help out, someone that might have had different challenges. So for 2 weeks, they would spend live in our home, renting out rooms. And there was a wraparound porch, and we'd all meet at, nighttime, for meals. And for myself and my siblings, it was quite an education and quite an impression on how to just take care of other people, people that are different from you. And it certainly impacted my ability, my desire to go into clinical psychology.
Sure. Both lovely stories. Bill, you'll have to write the book or the screenplay called 2 Weeks in August.
Yeah.
Focusing on that experience.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Meredith, talk a little bit about where was your mom a college professor, by the way?
She was at Goldie Beacom College in Wilmington.
Nice. And so, tell us a little bit about Meredith, like as high school neared its end, given the major focus that your parents placed on education, my guess is that it was sort of a given that you were probably going to go, but what was the decision-making process like that led you to choose where you ultimately went?
So I was interested in going into medicine, and I ended up going to Loyola College in Maryland, which is actually where my dad went. So it's right next door to where my mom went, which was Notre Dame of Maryland. And it ended up feeling like a really comfortable place. It was just the right size, medium to small university. It was Catholic, which had an emphasis on service. And I really had the opportunity there to do a lot of service, which really resonated with the kind of person that I was. And they had the right majors. So I majored in psychology and I kind of minored in biology and the sciences. I didn't end up going into medicine, obviously, but I ended up kind of getting a bug for really understanding and learning about the brain. But it was the right fit for me. And it ended up having the professors who had a lot of attention, who really worked well with me, which ended up being the kind of professor that I ended up being, if that makes sense. And I think it ended up being the right fit perfectly.
Sure, that's great. Bill, similar question. So you're first gen college student, but clearly your parents emphasize service in their behavior, which is absolutely critical. But as, again, high school neared its end, what were your options? What was your decision making about whether or not to attend college?
Very poor student in high school. Probably would have dropped out if it wasn't for basketball, although my parents probably would have killed me. So I probably would have stayed in. Didn't like school, really. And as I was coming to the end, I didn't really have a lot of options. Really didn't have any mechanical ability or interest in the trades. Didn't want to serve in the military. That wasn't something where I had that calling. So I was really low on options. Ended up going to Ocean County College. And that's where I really learned how to become a student. And it was a really good situation. I was on my own financially, so I had to figure out how to pay for it. Very affordable. And just had some great professors that were very interesting. Loved my psychology courses, loved my anatomy and biology courses, which kind of made sense given that I went into neuropsychology, which is like a blend of psychology and neurology and neuroscience. Transferred to Trenton State College, and then I really kind of hit my stride academically, got some things sorted out in terms of what I wanted to do. Again, had great professors. It was the school is now called the College of New Jersey. It was a really perfect fit for me. Worked really hard and then went to grad school and just kept going and going. So
sure. I think what's so important about that narrative, Bill, that I think really our listeners need to hear from my perspective is that, you weren't, from your own report, you were not a stellar student in high school, but then, you took the chance. You had to figure out the finances on your own, which clearly you did. And then over time, you found your place and thrived and did exceptionally well. So not every college student wasn't an academic superstar in high school. And I think there might be a lot of young people that just take that as a given, and it's just simply not true. And you've proven that and done exceptionally well. Meredith, let me ask you this. Were there any, it's sort of a two-part question, and feel free to take either part or both. Once you made it to Loyola in Baltimore, were there any challenges that you faced that had to be overcome? And then sort of the flip side of that is, what were the experiences that you had that you found were most valuable to you then and in going forward and establishing your career?
Oh, yeah, there were definitely challenges. I think that there were certainly a number of courses that were incredibly challenging. Organic chemistry comes to mind. And there were like other courses that were really, really difficult. And so I ended up obviously not going into medicine for a lot of those reasons. And it just didn't resonate with me. It wasn't the right course. I found that I really loved psychology. I took a course in neuroscience and I absolutely loved it. And that was like clearly like, I want to know more about the brain. I want to know how the brain works. And when you take courses like that, it doesn't feel like work. And when you know that that's what is the thing for you, then you want to know more about it and you want to keep going in that direction. I like Chestnut Hill, they had a 5-year bachelor's master's program in psychology, and I started that. And similarly, it just didn't feel right. Like I wasn't enjoying those classes. And so I didn't continue to pursue it. It wasn't challenging in the like kind of academic sense, but it was challenging in a different sense. It just didn't fit well. And so I left that program and went into a doctoral program in neuroscience, and I really, really enjoyed it. And studying was hard at times for sure, but it felt right because I was enjoying it.
And another really important element of that is that it's not uncommon to go into college thinking you're going to do one thing and then along the way finding that your passion is somewhere else. And it's really one of the most important lessons that can be learned. Bill, we just have a moment or two left. Let me turn to you. If you were to give our listeners one piece of advice, and let's say they're 16, 17 years old and they're on the fence about whether or not to work at Amazon for $25 an hour or go to college and navigate the waters initially and come out on the other side, what advice would you give?
Definitely invest in yourself, and getting an education is really going to help there. Don't talk yourself out of anything. Don't, look at how, hard it's going to be or how much it's going to cost. Just go for it. And similar to what Meredith said, you're going to find something that is a real click for you. It's interesting, you're good at it, and you can make a living doing it. And college just exposes you to such a wide range of opportunities. So that's what I would say. And take it one semester at a time. Don't look at it like, oh, it's 4 years, or if I'm going to get a doctorate, another 6-7 years. Just take it one semester at a time. Keep moving, and you're going to grow in your capacity to manage stress and higher level academics and figuring out how to pay for it. You're going to sort it out as long as you keep moving and as long as you work hard.
Excellent. So I want to thank Dr. Bill Ernst and Dr. Meredith Kneavel for spending some time with us today and talking about their incredibly important work to prevent concussion in athletics, and also to talk about their academic careers setting the table for such great professions. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. Until next time, take care.